Hey friends, so let's pick up here at our fifth video lecture, and we're going to talk about cognitive development in adolescence. Remember, cognitive development refers to how people learn to think differently. And according to Pinochet, who is a process or a stage cognitive developmentalist, what happens during this stage of development is, or the stage of development here is what is called formal operational. I'm trying to make my slides here fit just a little bit better. Give me just formal operational. So formal operational is characterized by a person's ability to think abstractly. And yes, it's a person's ability to think abstractly. So a couple important concepts in this stage is something called a hypoethical deductive reasoning. And this is a fancy way of saying that people or teenagers are able to think abstractly and they're able to think about hypothesis based on logic, right? Also during this period, because we're sort of able to think about things that are not concrete, previous stage was called concrete, this is also a time when a young person begins to think or develops or is more characterized by a way of thinking called egocentrism. So you have probably heard, the notion that teenagers are very self-centered and yes, that they're very self-centered. Well, this is a fancy way of this is the term for that self-centeredness, and that egocentrism is a heightened sense of self-focus. They attribute unknown power, and so basically, it's all about them. Along the same lines, because they're always thinking about themselves, they assume other people are also always thinking about themselves. So teenagers become pretty focused on what other people think, and everybody must be paying attention to them. And this is what we call, or the term given for, the imaginary audience. The imaginary audience, because teenagers are inclined to think that everyone is watching them, this has been suggested as one of the reasons that teenagers begin to demand more privacy, and they're reluctant to offer personal information. So I think about when I had teenagers, how I would ask them questions, and they would also often get very frustrated with me. Why was I asking all these questions? Why some sort of private investigator? Well, this makes sense. If you think that everybody's watching them, and you think everybody's thinking, if you think everybody's watching me and everybody's, paying attention to what I'm doing, and then this adult is going to come along and ask them more questions, you're going to be a little bit more resistant. But as we know, as grown-ups, we know that that's not the case, that not everybody is thinking about you or paying attention to you. Along the same lines, we have a concept called a personal fable, and a personal fable is the notion that somehow I am different and unique, and that may be what happened to you, mom and dad, that may be what happened to you, old person who's trying to tell me what to do, but that's not what's going to happen to me, because I am special and I am invulnerable, and I'm not going to make the same mistakes that you make. Okay, so additionally, a personal fable. Also, because young people are able to think abstractly and they're able to think about ideas, a teenager may be more inclined to become more idealist. So we're thinking they're egocentric. They start to think about themselves. They may think about what's going on in their head. When we turn inward to think about our thoughts, we call that being introspective. When we think about abstract thoughts, we may be thinking about the way the world should be, so we may be becoming more idealistic. So in short, what we have is cognitive changes. We have changes in the way we think, in the way teenagers think, they're more interested. They're idealists about themselves, right? They have this personal fable, but they're also idealists about the world. So hence a reason a way of explaining the idealism and the self-centeredness of teenagers. An element of cognitive development, right, when we start to think differently, we may also think about standards of right and wrong. This is what we call moral development. So our moral development is defined as how we begin to think about, how we begin to think about right and wrong. Gillian, forget her first name. I can't believe I forget her first name. Gillian offered a theory that she called a morality of care. and a morality of care offered 3 positions. And this should sound a little familiar because in a previous chapter, when we were talking about how children, middle children or middle childhood children define what is right and wrong, there should be some familiarity with these ideas. Position 1 of the morality of care is what's referred to as the survival orientation. And the survival orientation is defined as morality that is where a good behavior is defined as a behavior that promotes my individual survival, right? So it's pretty self-focused here. The next stage, position 2, conventional care, is a morality, is a definition of good behavior if it takes into consideration other people. So in a previous chapter, we were talking about that one level of a right behavior is if I avoid punishment, right? The next position of morality is if it's following the rules. Then the third position in morality of care is integrated. So this is a more sophisticated definition or way of thinking about what's right and wrong. And it's characterized by if I take my needs, what is good for me, and I integrate them with what is good for you. So the point is just like when we talked about other measures of cognitive development, we are moving up into a more sophisticated way of thinking about what is right and good. I'm going to stop here, and in the next video lecture, I can just pick up on emotional development instead of blend the two together.